Hey everyone, my name's Gunther, and welcome back to the Mountains of Asia, where today we focused on creating our final habitat for the snow leopard. I'm really excited to kind of just show this off and to finally say goodbye to the Mountains of Asia from a habitat perspective before we move on to something bigger and better than ever before. Now, the build. A lot of this inspiration, once again, surprisingly, came from Pinterest. And the idea behind this is I really want to have some jagged rocks acting as the backdrop of our habitat. And if you were part of our stream last weekend, you actually would have seen us kind of put this together really quickly. And I say really quickly, but it definitely does take a lot of time. But for the first time ever, a lot of the things that went into this particular build, they're actually blueprints, which might explain why this build went so fast. Now, the caveat to this is a lot of the blueprints, actually, in fact, all of the blueprints from this particular build, they're my blueprints. None of them are on the workshop because I just don't think that they're quite there just yet. And that doesn't mean that they won't be added to the workshop. But for me, the focus has always been about creating new blueprints for myself and challenging myself to improve and build bigger than ever before. Now, does that mean I don't take inspiration from blueprints? No, I get a lot of inspiration from pre-existing blueprints, but the idea behind it is it helps me to improve and build it even bigger and just kind of gain some new skills. So for that end, pretty much everything in this zoo is actually my blueprint with the exception of all of those signs from the lion pack, which if you haven't downloaded it, you should definitely do so because it just elevates your zoo so much more. Now let's talk a little bit about the habitat, because I've flown through this like I said. We are focusing on creating a 2-tier habitat for our snow leopard. A lot of these pieces will be reused from other habitat builds, but that kind of makes sense. If you have something that works, why would you create something new again? But as I mentioned, 2 tiers. The top tier is going to be really where they can kind of take a break from all of our guests. They can kind of get a little bit of a hidden away from home section. We've also added in a little covered den for them. Now this is going to be their exterior den. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to hang out up here, but I like the idea of giving them a small sheltered place. So if there's any inclement weather or anything like that, they can go in there and hide. On top of that, we have lots of walk work and terrain work, so to help make sure that they can get access and give them a few other different avenues of access, we're adding in a few climbing structures. Now, weirdly enough, the snow leopard actually doesn't require any climbing structures with PZ+. I don't know if that's actually a requirement in the regular base game, so I was kind of off-put by this, and I realized I don't have to add in any climbing structures, but I felt that I needed to do this just to make sure that they have some of those options. And who wouldn't want to see some type of leopard, whether the snow leopard or whatever, go and explore and hang out on some of these nice, really cool looking climbing structures. So to that end, just some basic pathing for them to kind of explore. All right, so we've gotten some of the interior set up, but it's time that we really focus on creating the boundary of our habitat, because it's kind of hard to build when you don't really know what you can build within. It's pretty easy to do so. Now, normally from a barrier perspective, and you've seen me build these 100 times, so I really focus on just creating something pretty basic, and this time I wanted to build something a little bit more fun. So to that end, I went with this concrete window barrier, and it's one-way glass. I really want to give all of these snow leopards some privacy, and what better way to do that than with some one-way glass? Now I'm going to use some of the wood beams to act as the base. This is going to hold all of the glass in place, and then I also took some of these plastic pieces and place them all along the edges, colored them black, and this kind of gives it that idea of a rubber gasket seal, just going to prevent any water from seeping into the windows. Super easy, very basic, and we've created our windows. Now the really cool thing is that we can pivot these any way we want, and we can create some really cool, interesting designs. And I think this is a perfect example of the importance of creating your boundaries, because I definitely need to move some of these rocks to make room for all of our barriers. Now you probably said, hey, the snow leopards are going to be able to get out of those mountains. And you're 100% right. So in order to make sure that they can't escape, we're going to utilize some more of these concrete wall pieces. More so because we can use the corner pieces to create some really cool designs. And I know in the past I've really focused on creating and utilizing some of the pre-existing barrier pieces. Today, wanted to do something a little bit different. And again, it's all in the effort of exploring and enjoying doing new things. Off camera, and you would have seen this at the very beginning as well, I also added in the rough outline of our building, and you'll see more of that pop up later in the episode. Now, with everything kind of set up, we know where we can build within. It's time for us to work on the foliage, and really rocks and bushes are how you're going to make your habitat pop. All of our rock work for the majority of the time is done, and for the first time ever, I've actually managed to add in caribou moss to our build. I don't know if this took maybe 4 habitats to find a place for some caribou moss, but I did it, and I'm happy. I feel like I've accomplished something in 2025 already. Now, I mentioned that a lot of the build pieces from this particular habitat are actually coming from all these other habitats that I built. And this climbing structure is no different, but I wanted to shake it up a little bit, and I totally forgot to add this. So I'm going to utilize some of these drapery pieces and color that a solid color, and I'll leave it there. It's almost like it's a blanket for all of our snow leopards to play around with. Alright, so this next part's kind of hard for me to explain why I did it. I struggle with empty spaces in my builds. I really don't like them, and you can use foliage and stuff like that to fill it in, but I tried something a little different this time. I went with some rock plateaus, and really the idea behind it is it's to add texture to the overall build. And I think this does a really cool job of doing that. Now for some additional variation, I took the rubble pieces from the temple packs and threw them in there as well. I realize that doesn't make sense, but when you look at it mixed in with all of the faux rocks, it definitely works out. And it's the same thing for this pathway up to the upper section. It looked pretty empty having such an open space there, so taking some rocks, placing them on the side, and putting them in there with some foliage really helped to seal the deal on this particular build. Now I will admit as well, we're kind of getting a little bland from the color scheme, so I added in some autumn leaf litter, and the orange really helps to create a little bit of a splash of color throughout the build. Now we're just halfway through the build, and that means it's time for us to take a little bit of a quick trip over to our Japanese macaque habitat. And as is normal, our community gets to name all of our animals, and this one comes from Weltmar from Reddit, who suggested Anpan, Mochi, Castella, Dango, Taiyaki, Daifuku, Kakagori, and Senbei. These are all names that fit so well because the majority of our names in our habitat so far have been food-based, and I felt that that was the best way to go about it. But I do want to say thank you to everybody who submitted their names because they were all fantastic. I loved every single one of them, and it was really hard to choose names for this particular batch of Japanese macaques. Now that doesn't mean that you don't have the option to choose some names for our new snow leopards. We have 2 today to pick some names for, and maybe they should be food related because a lot of the names have been food related. So in the comments below, make sure you leave a comment just letting me know what names you are suggesting for our new snow leopards. So the majority of our build is complete, and it's time for us to focus on the backstage. And I'm really kind of showing a lot of this backstage off because I'm so proud of what we've accomplished. More so because a lot of the stuff that went into this, we built on stream. So all those blueprints finally came to a head. We were able to use them the way they were meant to be used, and I loved how they turned out. Now this backstage is a little different because we've never built this particular style of backstage, which is giving 2 airlocks to get into our dens. So these are the interior dens, as well as some support buildings that are going to help our staff to work with all of our snow leopards. So I have a little bit of a trick for this one. You might have already noticed this entire backstage area is not being built where it's supposed to be built, which is in the habitat. We're actually building it outside the habitat. And the idea behind it is it allows me to work within the constraints that is the global axis so that I can make sure everything's going to flow in nice and neat and we're not going to have to fight with any of the axis problems and stuff like that. And that's the idea of creating some little templates for you to know where you're going to place your buildings, because it was very easy just to slide it out, adjust it, and slide it back in. And it worked out really well. In fact, I'm actually super proud of this because everything is like exactly mirrored between the 2 dens so that it looks perfect. And I don't know, maybe it's just something about seeing something that is mirrored correctly that works so well, and I think this is a perfect example. Now let's talk blueprints for 2 seconds. I want to say thank you to everybody who joined the live stream last week to help with me creating these blueprints, because you can see we're finally using them the way they're meant to be used, and I would not have been able to build them without you guys' help. So thank you so much for being part of that live stream and helping me to do this. And you can see we're using them the exact same way that we want to use them, which is as a modular design. So we can just piece them in wherever we want. And that's the idea of creating blueprints. And even better, these are my blueprints, and I'm super excited about that. So with some quick blueprints added in, I'm pretty much done with the backstage area. I do slide it back in, you can see it off in the distance there, and that's exactly where we want it to go. Now the last build for this episode is actually going to be a pretty fun one because it's our first sunshade for all of Sakura Zoo. And if you know me, sunshades are something I love to build. I actually absolutely love sunshades, and this one comes from our Discord. So thank you to Samasaurus, who provided this inspirational photo, and everybody who made fun of me saying that I was going to build something because it was a sunshade. And you're right, you know me too well. I did build it because it is a sunshade. Now I'm really excited with how this turned out because I challenged myself to do something differently, which is why I loved how this turned out. Specifically, utilizing these Planet Zoo anchor pieces and then adding some wires act as the support needed to hold all of these arms up, which are going to hold all the glass for our sunshade in place as well. Now, I realize, realistically, when you see the final product of this sunshade, I was looking at it the other day and I was like, oh, that's not going to do a lot of work when it's raining. Because it's not. It's going to push all that rain into the center. So whoever's sitting under the sunshade, you might want to leave when it rains, but that's a redesign issue for another day. But that's it. With this final build, we're pretty much done this entire area, and I really love how it kind of turned out. Now, if you were listening earlier, I did say that this was the final habitat of the Mountains of Asia, but it's not the final build. We do have to build some guest amenities for this area. In fact, we need to build guest amenities for our zoo because we actually don't have any, and as you can see, our rating for our zoo is only 2.5 stars because a lot of our guests are unhappy with the amenities. We need to add in some food and drinks and whatnot, and I think I have the perfect area to do that, and it's going to give us one last little trip to the Mountains of Asia. But that's it. We're pretty much at the end of the episode. And as normal, you're going to see some cinematic shots of the full build, and I do encourage you to take a look because a lot of the things that I put in place didn't quite necessarily make it into the video, and it wasn't because I accidentally forgot to record, I promise you. Or maybe it was, who knows. Now, if you like this build, or if you like the direction of Sakura Zoo, think about hitting the subscribe button. It's going to let you know the next time I upload, and traditionally I upload weekly. But on that note, I do want to say we're not going to be just doing uploads anymore. 2025 is a year of new experiences, new things. So you're going to see a monthly stream where we work on some things within Sakura Zoo that wouldn't normally make it into the build itself. And if you really want to participate and leave your mark on the zoo itself, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment with the names for our 2 new snow leopards. Otherwise, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, watching this video, and as always, ciao for now.